to She Plays the Podcast. I am so excited to have Caroline Fitzgerald joining today. Caroline is the CEO and founder of Goals, which is the first ever sponsorship consultancy that is focused on bringing more investment into women's sports. Amazing. Caroline, thanks for being on the podcast.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I am so excited. We've connected offline and in different ways. And so it's really nice to just finally get to have a chat. And I gotta say, when we did connect on Twitter, I think your bio says unapologetically working to grow women's sports. And I was like, yep, that's someone that I want to chat with and want to support. So yeah, excited to have you on.
Yes, it's so good to be here. I know there are so many synergies between what we're building at Goals and what you and your team are building at She Plays. And we're all just working towards the same goal of creating a more equitable sports world. So always fun to talk to somebody with the same, very pun intended, goal here. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is a beautiful thing in the industry that um a rising ship rises. What is it? When one ship rises, every ship
rising
rises.
tide.
Yeah, rising tide. Yeah, that's very true in this industry, I think, and so I love it. Yeah, so I definitely want to chat about goals, but real quick before we get to goals, I'd love to hear. Yeah, just did you play sports growing up? Kind of your love affair with sports. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I played sports my whole life. It's really part of my family's ecosystem. So I'm one of 8 kids, live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we were playing sport from the moment that we were born. I swear it was like we were born and then there was some sort of ball put in our hands. So I first started playing baseball. That was my first sport. And I played with my brother Tanner mostly. And my first like real organized involvement in sport was being the only girl on the all boys baseball team that Tanner played on. And that was a really big moment for me because I remember a lot of taunting and teasing from the other team because I was a girl and they were going to beat us because we had a girl on our team and all that. And I remember going out and playing really well and like getting all the boys out and thinking, yeah, like I can do this. I belong here. And I feel like that was a big moment for me early on in my sporting career, but went on to play all of the sports. Basketball was my main one, ran cross country, played tennis. I feel like the best way to keep 8 kids entertained is to send them outside to go play sports and games. So yeah, we're just always playing sports growing up. And I was always, I would say, above average. I ended up playing a varsity club basketball, Penn State. That was the highest my sporting activity went, but I still even play basketball to this day. I'm in an all women's basketball league here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it's just, I don't know, sports are just such a part of me and have been since I was very little.
That's awesome. And I love that you still play. Yeah, that's incredible. And in an all women's league, which maybe big cities have those. It's hard to find sometimes in smaller areas, but that's amazing.
It is amazing. I'm the biggest fan of this league. I actually just found out about it a year ago. There have been a bunch of co-ed leagues around, but I found this like one really dedicated league that has been going for years and years and is kind of a secret. So I was like, what? How has this been around and how did I not know about it? So I'm very, very grateful for it and have a lot of fun playing with people I used to play with in college and high school. And it's great.
That's awesome. That's so fun. And yeah, I mean, I think that there's something about, especially team sports, that we really miss as we grow up if we don't have them anymore in our lives. There's just so much that you get out of being competitive and having a team. There's just so many life lessons that you get from it. So that's awesome. That's really cool.
Agreed. I absolutely love it.
So, and as a baseball, I guess that's where you started. You said, how much have you loved the League of Their Own miniseries coming out? Just baseball, women in baseball, kind of once again getting the recognition that they're due.
You know what? It's very exciting. And Ashley, I don't know if you know this already. I don't think you do. I'm actually in it.
What?
This is like my really fun fact. So it was filmed here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So they did this big casting call for women that have baseball or softball experience to come and field the 3 baseball teams that aren't the Rockford Peaches, because they have obviously actors that play on those teams, but they're like, we need players for the Racing Bells. And the Kenosha Comets and the South Bend Blue Sox. So I went and tried out for the team, which was crazy. It was on the same field where I used to play baseball as a little girl, and made the team. So if you watch episodes 3, there's a really nice visual of me up to bat as a Racine Bell. And then episode 4, you see me a couple times in green on the Kenosha Comets, but it was like an absolute dream come true to be around it. And like, obviously this is such an important moment, like to have women's sports, the intersectionality around women's sports on the big screen. It's so important. And I like truly still can't believe I got to be part of it. It really is a dream come true.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, you even have an at bat performance. That's awesome.
I do. And my dad even approved my swing as my former baseball coach. He's like, "Oh yeah, you still have a good stance." So it was great.
Oh my gosh, you got to be a Racing Bell. That's amazing. That is so cool. Well, and just the history behind it. Again, like taking so long for some of these stories to get told. That is really cool to be a part of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and the response to it has been really interesting to watch as well. I think a lot of people thought it was just going to be a remake exactly of the movie, but at 30 years later, it's again taking intersectionality into consideration and really telling the stories of what was going on with these women at this time and all of the challenges that they faced trying to play baseball in this sports world and trying to fit into these kind of unrealistic gender norms that they were being asked to fit into. So it's really, really interesting show, and it's been fun to watch it because when you're on set, you don't really know all the storylines going on. You just know you got to run from first base to second base. So it's been great to watch the whole series.
Yeah, I'm in a group and we just watched the movie for from 1992, I think is when it came out, and it was still, landmark. It's still an amazing movie. But yeah, to see now 20 years later what storylines they're able to tell because it's now acceptable to tell them is amazing. So it is, I think, for some of the players that are still around with us, I'm sure they're thrilled to get to see a more accurate portrayal. But no, that's cool. Well, I could probably talk about League of Their Own for forever, but we got to talk about goals. So so you played ball at Penn State, club varsity, I think you said. That's cool. But yeah, so when did goals come about? What kind of led you career wise from college to now where you are?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story. So I'm going to give you the very short version of it. But I feel like I've always in my life thought I was going to be something at the intersection of feminism, business, and sports. Like growing up, I would have said my dream job was to be the head of the women's division at Nike. Which is which shows you that I didn't really understand how many possible jobs there are in women's sports when that's like really the only thing I could pull out. But, I really just kind of started down my career path and down my educational path with that goal kind of in the back of my head, knowing I would eventually want to do something again at the intersection of feminism and sports and business. So my educational background at Penn State, I studied marketing and women and gender studies. So I have dual degrees. My feminism has always been a really big part of me, and just looking at the world through a feminist lens and how everything impacts women. So my career journey is really winding. I started with Kohl's department stores. And I wanted to work with Kohl's because Kohl's is one of the only companies that called their customer a woman. So they always use she, her pronouns to describe their core customer. And in college, I did a lot of research around female consumer behavior. So started at Kohl's. That was in Pittsburgh and then in Wisconsin. While I was in Wisconsin, I really missed Pittsburgh and my family, admittedly. So was there for a couple years, but then moved back to Pittsburgh, took a job working for the Smithsonian Museum here in Pittsburgh, the Heinz History Center, where I was the director of public programs and put on events and created campaigns to draw a younger audience into the History Museum, which was really great experience. Got to do a lot with the Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum in that role. But it was around that time I was coaching basketball. I was a girls basketball coach for almost a decade. And, I just was coming back to that core goal. Like, I know I want to do something in sports directly with women. And I didn't accomplish the goal right away of doing something directly to impact women, but I did find a job working in sports. So I took a position working for the Dick's Sporting Goods Pittsburgh Marathon, and was involved with sponsorship sales there. So that's where I really got my sponsorship sales experience. I'd never done sponsorship sales before and almost didn't take the job because I didn't really view myself as a salesperson. I had this imposter syndrome that I didn't like look like a salesperson in a suit and on a golf course making deals. Like, I don't know, I didn't view myself as that. But had a real knack for it and really loved it, and learned quickly that it was just about building marketing plans for brands and working with people and managing accounts and all things I had done previously in my career. So was there in total for about 5 years and really climbed the ladder there, became the senior vice president of partnerships and sponsorships. And goals came about while I was still working at the marathon, working from home during the pandemic. And the pandemic for me was a moment, I think, for a lot of people, at least the height of it, when we were all in our homes. I took a moment to kind of pause and come back to, I think, that big goal from when I was little is do something at the intersection of sports and business and feminism. And at the time, I got to become a sports fan really for the first time in my life. So I never growing up, even though as much as I love sports, men's sports never really resonated with me. And being from Pittsburgh, I should be like a lot of my neighbors and friends, like the biggest Steelers, Pens, and Pirates fans in the world. And I certainly am all about the city pride and I'm always cheering for those teams, but I've never been like, yes, I love these players. I really relate to them, because I never really did. But then in 2020, when I was again home and had the luxury of having some more time on my hands and got to sit down and really watch the 2020 WNBA season and become a real sports fan, I was really activated by that season, because I was inspired by the incredible basketball. As I said, I'm a basketball player, and it was like, wow, how are they playing such elite levels of basketball in the middle of a global pandemic while they're in this bubble? Many of these players are mothers. They have their children with them in the bubble. I can't even imagine what this is like. But beyond that is the players fought for racial and social justice. They dedicated the whole season to the Black Lives Matter movement. And it was maybe, I think a strong argument can be made that it was the most politically active sports season in the history of sport. I really think that argument can be made. And they impacted so much change and did so much. And I was really inspired by that. And I was also intrigued by it because while they were having this really politically active season, they were also seeing record-breaking viewership, sponsorship sales, merchandise sales. So there was some sort of correlation going on between women athletes leaning into their inherent roles as activists and it driving results and being good for business. So, that kind of idea just started spinning around in my head, and I kind of became obsessed with it, to be honest with you. And it was around that time that I decided I was going to go back to school and get a master's in global sport to study the intersection of feminism and sports business. I decided I wanted to listen to a podcast about this topic and I couldn't find one. So I decided to launch a podcast called The Business Case for Women's Sports that examines topics like that and brings leaders from the women's sports industry on to talk about why they think it's good business for brands and networks to invest in women's sports. So that was really how goals started, kind of out of a little bit of anger, a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of curiosity, and had the idea, to start the podcast, and started some corresponding marketing channels to promote it. And then after doing those things for a year, it kind of clicked for me that I was a sponsorship sales professional and I had the skill set. And maybe I could put all these things together and start an agency that does sponsorship sales for women's sports teams and organizations that need more resources. And could sponsorship sales be one of those ways they get more resources? Absolutely. And let's see if I can help them do that. So that's the kind of long-winded story of goals, but it has been quite a journey. But I feel like I'm finally sitting in a place that it's the true intersection of my academic backgrounds, my professional skills, and my personal passions. And it feels really good to be sitting here.
That's awesome. Well, and just yeah, finding your place where you feel completely inspired and are making a difference. Yeah. So you work with teams and athletes or leagues, or who is your client base, I guess?
Yeah, it's primarily professional women's sports teams and specifically hockey teams. So I work with 4 teams in the Premier Hockey Federation. So the Metropolitan Riveters in New York and New Jersey, the Boston Pride, the Montreal Force, and the Toronto Six. So that's the core client base of goals. So we're the agency of record for those teams. And then we've worked with a couple other organizations. So one is Baseball for All, which is the national nonprofit that helps create opportunities for girls to play, coach, and lead in baseball, which is, you can imagine, is very close to my heart, seeing as how I got into sport playing baseball as the only girl on my all boys team. We've worked with a couple other organizations as well in different spaces, apps, and some other teams, some other leagues. Just I think our core client that we've worked with, and this is the theme across the entire women's sports industry, is underfunded women's sports organizations, which is quite frankly all of them. But our, for now, where we've stayed is mostly in the professional women's hockey space. And I use the royal we. Right now, goals is me and one other person in a part-time capacity. But we are looking to grow. So hoping to be doing that in the next couple weeks or so.
Well, that's exciting. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I feel like weekly I am shocked to learn of just another way that people have overlooked women's sports. Just being in the industry, you learn very quickly, wait, women are even a part of this discussion. So amazing. Kudos to you for, yeah, seeing a huge need. Just even someone to even be a wing of some of these leagues that can't afford to hire someone to do that. But to bring someone on as a consultant is such a gift to them and so needed, because all they need is someone to get out there and tell them, right? Like the record viewership, record, social media presence. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really exciting to know, especially for the hockey league that's had such turnover and change. So, yeah, that's awesome. What would you say? We'll do like the maybe like sad question. What do you think is something you've like the worst lack of investment that you've seen in the industry, maybe, or just like the thing that was most shocking, like, wait, what? And then like, yeah, let's start there, I guess, if there is something that comes to mind.
I mean, the pay gaps across the entire sports industry are just absolutely abysmal, the gender pay gaps. And even we see gains that happen in women's sports every single day with viewership and sponsorship sales and even pay disparity, but the gaps are just so vast. To give you some examples, in professional hockey, there's about a $15 million pay gap between the highest paid player in the NHL and the highest paid player in professional women's hockey in North America. With the NBA, the highest paid player, Steph Curry, I want to say Steph makes, is it $48 million a year? And Diana Taurasi makes $228,000 a year as the highest paid player. And that doesn't even compare. I Goals tweeted this the other day about the Denver Nuggets mascot who makes $625,000 a year, which is 3 times what the highest paid WNBA player makes. So these pay gaps exist across the entire industry, and it's just, it can be daunting to look at it and think, oh, wow, we really do have a long way to go until we reach pay equality in sports.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be on your show soon enough, and we can chat about the stats side of it too, because that was the one to me that I'm just like, whoa, wait a minute here. But yeah, so really cool that you are actively a part of making that better. So just know that you're an active member of this push towards equality. So the work you do is very important. What would you say are like the top 2-3 talking points Like if you were to go to a big brand tomorrow and be like, this is why you should do this, it's a no-brainer. Are there a couple things that you just are like super passionate to share with folks?
Yeah, definitely. When we talk to brands, I think it's first and foremost it's about educating them about women's sports. Women's sports receive 1% of global sponsorship dollars. So pretty much every conversation that I have, it's usually one of the first conversations that these teams have had about even getting involved with women's sports. So there's a huge educational component to sales. It's not your typical sales pitch where you can just kind of get down to business and like negotiate and talk about contracts. I think with men's sports, it's kind of like, oh, of course we want to get involved with this major professional men's sports team that we are been following our whole life and they have a million eyeballs on them. With women's sports, there's definitely more of an education. A lot of cases, in a lot of instances, they don't even really know about the leagues or the teams, which makes sense because women's sports also only receive 5% of media coverage. So there's this huge educational component. So definitely starting with like, let me tell you more about the state of women's sports in general and all of these good things. But I think the real why behind what I do, and I think what so many of us in women's sports do, is we see the connection, and there's all this data to back it up, that girls who play sports literally become women who lead. I think it was Play a Society who coined that term. But there's data that shows that 94% of C-suite female executives played sports growing up. And there's just so many. I mean, you talk about this on your podcast all the time about how there's so many skills that girls and women gain through playing sports, and it's so important. And so, I think what's really important is not only, but when brands invest in women's sports, not only are they investing directly in women's sports, but they're actually investing in creating a more equitable world, since we know that playing sports trickles into these leadership skills and these skills that go into so many different industries and so many facets of the individuals' lives that participate. So, I think it's when we talk to brands, it's educating them that this is about something bigger, and using the transformative power of sport is a way that we can help build a more equitable society. So I think that's the big one we kind of talk about. And then, of course, talking about these athletes and what they do, the fact that most of them work full time and are professional athletes or have children, or they're just so dynamic and so interesting. And I think once these brands learn a story about an athlete or two, it's like, how could they not invest or get involved to support these players who are just incredible?
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Well, and you said, yeah, hopefully expanding your team. Anything else in the future for goals that you're really excited about and want to share?
One thing that we do at Goal, we definitely go out and we do the work to bring more money into women's sports, which, we're not just yelling it into the internet. We're actually working every day to try to do it. But we also think it is important to yell into the internet, if you will, and create content to be thought leaders to help educate people about this business opportunity around women's sports, and that there is value in investing in women athletes. So I think you're going to see more content from us in the future, specifically around our podcast, The Business Case for Women's Sports, because there's been, as we're having more infusion of cash into women's sports and more people dedicating their time and professionals working in this space, we're seeing all these great case studies of success that people are finding with their teams, their leagues, their individual parts of the industry. And I think it's really important that women's sports industry professionals can learn from each other and learn from these examples. How can we grow women's sports if we can't study women's sports? We need to be able to learn from each other and know about what everybody's doing. So you're going to continue to see more content from Goals that will hopefully be helpful to women's sports industry professionals.
Awesome. Can't wait to see all that. That is exciting stuff. And where can folks find you, follow Goals online? We'll put all these links in the show notes, but where can folks find Goals and you?
Yes, we are most active across Twitter. So Twitter, I would say Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Maybe we're most active across all of them. But if you just search goals sports on Twitter and Instagram will come up, or at goals_sports_. LinkedIn, it's goals women's sports. I'm also putting out unapologetic content of my own on Twitter at PGH Caroline. So you can find us there, and through social media is how you can get connected to our website and everything like that. And our podcast, The Business Case for Women's Sports, is available across every podcasting platform.
Sweet. And we will put all those in the show notes. And yeah, definitely give a follow, subscribe to the podcast, all that good stuff. I've taken so much of your time. I'm just going to do 3 rapid fire questions, if that's okay, to close out. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing about you and sharing about what you're doing. It's really exciting and just the start. I know it's going to be a game changer for the industry. So, okay, real easy one to start off. Who's the greatest athlete of all time in your mind?
Oh, this is such a hard question. I mean, it's Serena Williams.
Yeah, that's
it's not a hard question. It's Serena Williams. So
that is
next.
Next, yeah. If you could get tickets for life for one sporting event, you get them free tickets every time this event happens. Could be every year, could be every 4 years. What are you getting tickets for?
Wow, that is a great question. I mean, I'm just such a huge WNBA fan, so I don't know. I don't even want to say like WNBA finals. Maybe I'll say that but like season tickets to a WNBA team would just be incredible. And that's actually not a very hard to attain thing, but it is hard when you don't have a WNBA team in your city. Yeah. So, I think in a perfect world, I would have a WNBA team in Pittsburgh and I would have season tickets to that team.
There you go. We'll speak that into existence. Love that. And then this one, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm just excited to hear your answer. I know we've talked about it a lot in this episode, but what do you want to see continue to change in the sports world for women?
All of it. But the biggest thing that we work to change at Goals is the 1% of sponsorship dollars that go to women's sports. So I really think that's the key to creating more equity in sports. So I want to see that number move. I want to see that get to 50%.
Amazing. Mic drop right there. There you go. Caroline, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I've really enjoyed chatting. And like I said, everyone listening or watching, please find the links in the show notes and yeah, go follow Goals and follow along with what they're doing.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.